college dorm. They even stopped to buy milk right after it. In fact, they not only bought milk, but then the younger brother came back into the store to exchange it for another milk. Very, very odd. Not the normal behavior of Islamic fundamentalists. But the key point is they never claimed credit for this, and they didn't act in any way, shape, or form like the prototypical Islamic fundamentalist terrorist. And so it doesn't fit. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the FBI put up pictures of these two guys shown wearing backpacks, and they said these are subjects of interest. Does anyone know who they are? So my first thought is, why are they subjects of interest? What is it about two young guys wearing backpacks in a video at a public event with presumably hundreds, if not thousands, of people with backpacks? So I didn't get why they thought they were of interest. Now, the third thing was that within days of that, a report came out in the Russian media, some sort of a leak from the Russian security forces, that the Russians knew who these brothers were. And furthermore, that the Russians had previously notified the Americans of these people prior to the bombings. And then the FBI was forced to admit that they had hid that fact or forgotten that, which is really preposterous. And they were forced to admit that, yes, the Russians had told them, and that, in fact, yes, they had checked them out as possible terrorists, and that they had interacted with the elder brother and the family and concluded that he was no threat. Now, how is that not front and center of what we're talking about in this case? Because even in the best case scenario, it means that the FBI is no good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. How do they, I have the same friend that's a police officer. I brought that up to him, and he did say that sometimes you investigate something and then you see nothing there, and then you move on, and then it's possible that something could happen afterwards. They could become extremists or whatnot afterwards. I guess that is one side.
Well, of course, but you can't just have outfits like the FBI with the power and the money and everything they have and just let them off like that. We're not talking about a child who spilled something.
Yeah.
This is an outfit, as you point out, they were able to shut down an entire American city and suspend our civil liberties, and that your cop friend is not even slightly curious, or that there are no consequences or no investigations or no recriminations or no heads roll, that your cop friend doesn't even occur to him that maybe if somebody, pardon my French, screws up that big, that there ought to be some kind of result to that there ought to be some kind of investigation and something ought to be fixed. The fact that these people are so clueless as to not even understand that, if you discover that the babysitter is a pedophile, you don't go, well, okay, whatever. You don't, and you should not do that in an instance like this. So that's just baloney. And at our website, WhoWhatWhy, we have done almost 80 articles about the Boston Marathon bombing. That's about 80 more investigative pieces than any of your news organizations, including the Boston Globe or anybody else. There was no serious attempt to investigate the holes in the story. They could have done a 10-part series just on how the FBI screwed up, how it happened, who screwed up, why, what changes they have made, whether there were any kind of punishment meted out against the people responsible. Why was there none of that? Why was there no discussion? Why was there no investigation? Now, the third thing on that front, or I don't know, I've lost count, is that it turns out that the FBI was in contact with Tamerlan Tsarnaev before the Russians tipped them off. Before. Now, we are the only people to report this. Again, if you go to WhoWhatWhy.org and you go in our search box and put in Tsarnaev, Tsarnaev, and you'll get a lot of articles, but somewhere in there you'll find articles on that particular point. The FBI had a prior relationship with the elder brother. Now, once you know that, and you're not willing, and you see how nobody was punished, you start saying, well, if nobody was punished for either gross incompetency or something else, and there was a secret prior relationship with the brother, don't you think we ought to wonder if we're missing something here?
Yeah, yeah. And there's that video. I don't know what your conclusion is or what your opinion is on that video of that nude person being arrested that looked a lot like the older brother. But have you? I don't know if that was him but it certainly did look like him. And the build, he's kind of built like him, like an athlete boxer. And what do you think happened to the older brother? Obviously, there's conflicting stories with the brother ran him over or the cops ran him over after the trial and all the investigation and information you gathered. What do you think happened?
Well, I mean, we published an article fairly early on discussing the fact that the FBI routinely recruits foreign nationals, which is what the elder brother was, and put them into play as informants and provocateurs. This is a standard operating procedure. And even the New York Times, which didn't have the guts to investigate this thing, did publish a piece pointing out that out of 22 plots, 18 of them involved people being run by the FBI. Now, hello. So, I mean, to not be interested in that, I mean, I really despair for this country, and I despair for the media. I despair for the so-called intellectual elites, because either we're like the stupidest people on earth or there's something else going on, because the fact that the kind of things that we've uncovered are not of interest to people and they continue to wave their flags and cheer. I mean, my God, we have no right to call ourselves, talk about American exceptionalism and talk about how, strut around and how superior we are and these pathetic, immigrants who want to come here. I mean, honestly, this is just a complete and total abdication of common sense and of everything else. And so when I look at that story, I mean, there is a very high probability that if, as we know, the FBI had prior contact with Tamerlan Tsarnaev, that they did not simply go talk to him and ask him if he was a terrorist, which is what they claim. There's another article on our site, WhoWhatWhy.org. You can read. It was a special report by the inspectors general of a bunch of the major intelligence agencies. Now, that's not normal that they do this interagency report. That itself was special. When the report came out, it got very little attention, even though it was such a singular event. Much of what was in there was blacked out, so we can't even read it. And even what they didn't black out showed these inspectors general of these agencies themselves complaining that they were being stonewalled and prevented from knowing what was really going on. They ended up doing a whitewash because they had to, but they made very, very clear, and you didn't have to read too much between the lines, that they could see that there was a cover-up going on and they were being blocked. And so it seems to me that an open-minded, serious person, given the track record of the FBI in general, the pattern of recruiting infiltrators and provocateurs, the fact of the documented FBI prior relationship with Tamerlan Tsarnaev, and then we add some other things. Tamerlan Tsarnaev was no sign of him being a radical. He was married to a blonde non-Muslim, although we are told she converted. I mean, he didn't fit the profile in any which way. We do know that around the time that he began to appear to be a radical, he was seeking to enter the Golden Gloves competition. He was a very gifted boxer, but he was told that to represent the United States in competitions, he had to be an American citizen. And so right at the moment that he needed to impress the American authorities with his patriotism, which is what that process is about, he begins acting like a radical Muslim and doing clumsy things and going into mosques and kind of yelling and seemingly provoking people. Now, it doesn't take a genius to put two and two together there.
Yeah, and see, you're hitting on a really, really important issue, and that's motive. You talk to any detective, you talk to any investigator, I mean, motive is one of the biggest things you look into, and the fact that a lot of these cases, the motive is still unclear. It's not like you said, extreme radical who makes his motive very clear. Either a Confederate flag guy or a extreme Muslim who like you said. Blows himself up, and he thinks he's going to heaven, and all these things. I mean, it doesn't seem like the typical extreme thinking extremist who has a clear motive and makes it obvious to the world. And I mean, it just seems kind of. I mean, it kind of seems like Jack Ruby. Like Jack Ruby. Oh, he killed Oswald because he was patriotic. All of a sudden, I mean, this guy was a mobster who obviously didn't give a shit about politics. So it was it just seemed like one of those things where you're looking into motive, which I think is a really important point. And I think a lot of times we just kind of put that aside and kind of create our own motive. And I just think that that's something that we should look more into, because to do something as extreme as building bombs and killing 3 people, injuring many more, you would think that they were quite extreme, and it would be quite clear that they're quite extreme. And like you said, it doesn't seem like the picture all fits together correctly. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask you about was, I know you looked into, his name's not really Danny, but the Danny video, the kid who ran away at the gas station, and I've seen that video and stuff. And what's your conclusion to that? And for people who haven't heard about that whole situation and kind of the holes in that story, could you expand on that?
Sure, and just want to wrap up on the point you were making about motive. We could talk for an hour just about motive, but there's also, as you know, there's motive, means, and opportunity. And I want to talk for a second about means, because after the bombs went off, and that week, the experts declared that the bombs were very sophisticated. And even after one brother was dead and one was apprehended, we were told that they lacked the capability to manufacture those bombs, that they were not qualified to do that. We also know that the authorities never discovered where the bombs were made. They were, they went over their homes with a fine-tooth comb, and they did not feel that the bombs had been made there. So the question is, if they didn't have the capability to make the bombs were not made on their premises, then what are we missing here? So I just want to raise that there are literally probably 50 or 100 significant points like that we could talk about. But to move on to your other point. Most of us don't even remember why we are. You earlier in the program talked about people who get angry at you because they say, we know that they did it. So I say to people, how do we know that? And they just look at me with astonishment. I was just up on Martha's Vineyard. I ended up in a conversation with a very, very famous, nationally famous Boston lawyer. People can probably figure out who it is. And his son was there, a nice fellow. We started talking, and the son said, we know they did it. And I said, your father is a famous criminal defense lawyer, so how do we know they did it? And, he basically sort of stared at me and, kind of was like, well, the authorities told us they did it. I said, well, you grew up in a household where you're all about questioning whether people actually did it, So this is the group think. This is the mindset, and this is an intelligent guy. That I'm not picking on him, but my point is that's the best of the best, and it's all downhill from there. Now, as far as this Danny story, one of the reasons we think he did it is basically because they kept telling us that he did it, and there were leaks and calculations